Hey guys, welcome in Gorilla Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Alex Bulpin, and it is Saturday, October the 19th. All right, guys. Now, I want to get this podcast out a day early as there's another London, England game at 9:30 Eastern time. So the sooner you hear it, the sooner you can get the plays in. All right, my first play is we're going right to that London, England game, and I'm taking Demario Douglas, the New England Patriots wide receiver, and we're going to take him over 45.5 receiving yards. Now, I see this keeps ticking on up as a lot of people seem to be thinking the same way that I am. I see it up to about 48.5 or even 49.5. I like it anywhere under 51, 52.5 is probably my threshold where I would stop. Now, he has covered this in his last 2 games. He's covered this in 3 out of his last 4 games, and he's averaging over 58 yards over that 4-game stretch. That is beautiful. Now, he's got a real good connection with Drake May. His last game, he had 9 targets, 6 catches, 92 yards. Jacksonville gives up the 3rd most receiving yards to the wide receiver position and gives up the 2nd most passing yards to the quarterback position. This is a great spot to have a nice big breakout game for Demario Douglas. My next play is I'm taking George Kittle, and I'm taking him over 48.5 receiving yards. Now, also, I've seen this tick up to about 50.5. I would go up to about 53.5 is probably my threshold, my cutoff at that point. Now, again, he's covered this in his last 2 games. He's covered this in 3 out of his last 4 games, and he's averaging over 60 yards over that 4-game stretch. That is beautiful. We have a nice 10, 12 yards of value there. Over his last 2 games, he's had 6 targets and 5 catches and 12 targets and 8 catches. Beautiful. Now, Kansas City is dead last at covering the tight end position. They're last at receptions, last at targets, and last at receiving yards. Beautiful. Now, they're averaging over 8 catches and 80 yards to the tight end position, and we're taking George Kittle, who's an elite tight end, over his receiving yard prop at 48.5. My next play is I'm taking Chris Godwin, and I like him over 69.5 receiving yards. I would get this one in as soon as possible. It's a Monday night game, but I really think this number is going to go up. Baltimore gives up the 4th most receiving yards to the wide receiver position, and they're an absolute pass funnel, which just means they are number 1 against the run and number 31 against the pass. So the only way to beat Baltimore is to pass on them. Now, Mike Evans has also been injured. However, it looks like he's going to play, which is actually really good for us as he's kind of work as a decoy more than an actual target monster. And Chris Godwin is just having an absolute comeback year so far. He's 3rd in the league with 511 receiving yards, and he's averaging over 85 a game. And we need him over 69.5 in a great matchup versus Baltimore. This is a good spot. Chris Godwin over 69.5 receiving yards. My next play is I'm going to the Seattle and Atlanta game, and I've got a couple of plays in this one I like. My first one, I'm going to take Kenneth Walker over 3.5 catches. Now, the best place you can find this is at FanDuel at minus 138. Now, I got this at DraftKings at plus 100 earlier in the week. That number is long gone, but he has covered this in 3 straight games. Now, I said this last week as we were on a Kenneth Walker receiving yards prop, and he smashed over that number for us. But he had 8 catches in that game. 8 catches. We're looking for 4. So his last 3 games, he's at 8 catches, 7 catches, and 4 catches. So covered in all 3. Love it. Atlanta gives up the 7th most targets and the 7th most receptions to the running back position, but they're 29th in receiving yards, which means they can tackle the guys after they catch it. They're giving up the catches, but they tackle them easily. So that kind of lays in with our over 3.5 catches perfectly. Give me Kenneth Walker over 3.5 receptions. In that same game, I like Geno Smith, and I like him over his rushing yard prop. Now, it's set at 11.5. This is a great number for us. He's covered this in 2 out of his last 3 games and covered by a mile. He went 4 for 72 versus the Giants and 5 for 38 versus Detroit. Perfect. Atlanta gives up the most rushing yards to the quarterback position. Their last 3 not really running quarterbacks. Andy Dalton, old man Dalton, went 3 for 21, would have covered this prop. We bet on Baker Mayfield's rushing yards in that game, and he went 6 for 42, doubling the number we needed from him. Patrick Mahomes went 6 for 17. And then the 2 actual running quarterbacks are Fields went for 57 yards and Hurts went for 85. So this is a great spot to get Geno Smith over 11.5 rushing yards. My next play is I'm taking Tyler Algier, and I'm taking him over 38.5 rushing yards. Now, I like this look for Algier. He just came off his best game of the year versus a cake matchup in Carolina, as Carolina is dead last to the running back position. but he just went for 18 for 105 and a touchdown. He out-touched and out-carried Bijan Robinson in that same game, which is a perfect spot. Now, they're going versus Seattle. Seattle gives up the third most rushing yards to the running back position. Their last two games, they let San Fran, the combination of Mason, who got injured, and Garendo go for 172 yards. And then Tyrone Tracy for the Giants had his breakout game going for 129 yards. Now, Tyler Algier is not going anywhere, so unfortunately for Bijan Robinson fantasy owners, he's going to be part of this offense, and his running style works really well with their running scheme. It's a zone rush scheme where you just kind of follow the offensive lineman, and it's a one cut and go, and Algier has that kind of style where Robinson kind of dances around in the backfield too much. That's why his yards per carry aren't quite as good as Tyler Algier's. So I like Tyler Algier over 38.5 rushing yards. My next play is I'm taking Joe Mixon, and I'm taking him over 15.5 receiving yards. Now, he's only played 3 games this year, and all 3 of these games he's covered this number. And Green Bay gives up the 4th most receiving yards to the running back position. This is a great spot for Mixon. He's an absolute 3-down bell cow back when he's on the field. He gets all of the action, so this is a perfect spot. I really like him over 15.5 receiving yards. My next play is I'm taking Tony Pollard, and I like him over 3.5 receptions. Now, normally he has his 1B running back sharing the backfield with him in Tajay Spears, but not only has he kind of already taken over this job, but Tajay Spears is injured. Now, both of them are rushers and receivers. Tajay Spears eats up a lot of targets and a lot of catches out of that backfield, but this is going to be all Tony Pollard. The rest of the running back room are nobodies. The only time they're going to take him off the field is when he's, either a little bit injured or a little bit tired. But other than that, this is going to be the Tony Pollard show. Now, they're going versus Buffalo. Buffalo is dead last to the running back position in targets, catches, and receiving yards. On Monday night, we just took Breece Hall. We took 3 different reception props for Breece Hall versus this Buffalo team, and it came through. That was our same game parlay. All 3 came through as a winner, so we've smashed receiving props against this Buffalo team a ton. So I like Tony Pollard over 3.5 catches. And my last play is I'm going to take Brock Bowers of the Las Vegas Raiders, and I like him over 59.5 receiving yards. Now, he stepped up a ton in the absence of Devontae Adams with his fake hamstring injury. Now he seems to be all better now that he's on a different team. But in his absence, he's gone 9 for 71 and 8 for 97 over his last 2 games. That's beautiful. Rams give up the 3rd most receiving yards to the tight end position. That's perfect. And Las Vegas is a 7-point underdog, so they're going to have to catch up points, which means they're going to be passing a lot later in the game. So I do really like Brock Bowers over 59.5 receiving yards. All right, guys, that's all the plays we got for Sunday. I'll have a podcast out for Monday as well for you guys. And if you're rocking with me, let's roll.